And so I stepped away from it for a while. I was just feeling like I needed a break from trying to force a second book. And in the meantime, we were spending all this time out in the wilderness in Colorado. We were seeing our kids growing up and just having these incredible connections with the natural world. And I started to see that there is a real overlap between scripture and nature. And I think God created it that way. So when my husband and I were in Bible school, they taught us that there are two main ways that God reveals himself to us. And the first is special revelation. That's his written, inspired, living and active word. That's his primary revelation to us that we actually get the gospel message from. But then there's a secondary revelation called natural revelation. And it is what we learn about God through what he has made.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Well, hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Strong by Design podcast. My name is Jared. I have a great episode for you guys today. We release a new episode every Wednesday. I'm so glad you guys are joining us today. And really the topic today is how do we discover God through creation? What does that look like for you personally? What does that look like for your family? And as a parent myself, how can I raise my kids in a way that they are able to look at creation and just find God in those things? And we have an incredible guest with us I was going to say this morning. It's not even morning. I don't know why I wouldn't say that. We have an incredible guest on the show today. And her name is Eryn Lynum. And Eryn wrote an incredible book called Rooted in Wonder. This is what it looks like. Back it up. Rooted in Wonder. And basically, it's the subtitle is Nurturing Your Family's Faith Through God's Creation. And so excited to have you on the show with me today, Eryn. Excited to just hear your wisdom, the things that God has taught you. And one of the really cool things is when Eryn and I first started talking, she just started sharing a little bit about her story and her family. And there's so many similarities between your family and our family. And so I'm just going to let you introduce yourself a little bit, maybe tell a little bit about your family and how you ended up where you're at.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I am excited for our conversation today. Yeah, my husband and I, we've been married for 14 years. It'll be 15 next year, and we have 4 kids. So we also have 3 boys and a girl, and our boys are 12, 10, and 8, and our daughter is 5. And it was so funny as I was listening to your story on the podcast because there were a lot of similarities, starting with my husband and I connected online when I was spending time in Ireland. So I was in...
What were you in Ireland for?
It was just a personal trip. Technically, we went to the same tiny Bible college outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but we had not met. He's 5 years older than I am, so he had gone through the program before me. But I was in Ireland. My best friend at our college, her family lived in Ireland, so we spent Christmas break there in Northern Ireland. And while I was there, my husband...
What year is that?
Oh, my word. That would have been 2007. Nope. 2007. Yeah, that's when I was there.
Yep, so I was there.
That is so crazy. Yeah.
I actually think that is the Christmas that we got. No. Yeah, it was. That was the Christmas that Christiane and I got engaged.
Oh, that's so 2007. Funny. So we were...
in Ireland.
Oh, my word. That's when I was in Ireland. We didn't get engaged till the following year because I was 17. So he waited. Yeah. But so my husband is Grayson, and he found me online. That sounds so weird. But back in the day, like we were just moving into the Facebook era. And he had seen online a picture of me with a mutual friend. And this is kind of a funny part of the story. But earlier that year, he had seen me drive up to school in my vehicle, which was a beefed up Jeep Wrangler, and he was a Jeep guy. And so he had it in his head that he needed to meet me. And so when I was in Ireland, he added me on Facebook. And to this day, I have no idea why I accepted his friend request. Some strange guy, he had this creepy profile picture, but I did. And So we connected in person when I got back from Ireland and started dating shortly after when I turned 18.
Yeah. Crazy. So you guys got married. It seems like you were pretty young then when you got married as well.
Yeah, we got married in 2009. I was 19 and he had just turned 24.
Yeah, it's so funny because we got married in 2009 as well. We got married in January though.
Okay.
So you guys didn't get married in January, did
No.
you?
August. Yeah, in Wisconsin, January wedding is not ideal.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, we got married in Colorado in 2009, and I think there was some snow on the ground, but Colorado was a little different than further into the Midwest. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's funny now. My wife and I both grew up in Colorado and lived in Colorado, and now we've since moved down to Tampa. But now you guys are in Colorado.
Yes,
correct?
We've been here 8 years now. So we both grew up in the Midwest, and the Lord brought us out here. We just fell in love with the wilderness and everything wild. But I have to say, the eeriest thing when I was listening to your story and your wife's story was you said, and I had never heard anyone else say this about their stories of coming together, was that when she first told you that she loved you, what did you say? You said thank you, right?
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, did you not want me to read that?
It's not a proud moment, but at the same time, it kind of is. And I like to give my side of the story with why.
Okay, give your side and then I'll share my story.
Okay, the reason why I said thank you was because we were, people said I love you all the time. Like, I had friends in high school that they would start dating someone and like 2 weeks later, they're like, oh, I love you. And I'm like, no, you don't, And so I wasn't just going to throw the words around just to say it, I wanted to make sure I felt the same way.
See, and I think that's noble. That's right.
Yeah, she didn't feel that way in the moment. Maybe she appreciates it more now, but go ahead. So,
that was my same reasoning. And so I just had it in my head. I was not going to say I love you to a man until I knew I was going to marry him. So 2 weeks into dating, Grayson says to me, hey, I love you. And I looked at him and I said, thank you. And I walked away. But it was that, like, over that same night, I just realized, like, no, actually, I'm going to marry this guy. And so the next day I told him. But
exactly what happened with me. And I remember because she was going to Regis University. And I went to the college, went to her dorm room, and I sat her down. I said, hey, those things that you said to me was really, the whole thing is like slightly embarrassing now, but it was, I'm like, I feel the same way. I love you too, but I really needed time to think about it and process it. Because I didn't want to just say it just to say it. And so how did he respond? Like, I know Christiana has told me that she thought that I was going to break up.
Oh, okay. So I think your version, again, I've never heard anyone with that similarity in their story. Yeah. Yours sounds more serious. Ours was more like, I don't know what he thought. I think he was just kind of confused or like, oh, okay, she's not ready to say it yet. Because I don't think he doubted at all that. And it's kind of cute. So we have this tattoo, this matching tattoo on our wrist that's just a simple square with a heart in it. And when we started dating, I started just drawing this little square on his wrist, like in pen. And he was always like, oh, what goes in the box? And me trying to be all mysterious, I don't know, you figure it out. And so the day when I decided, okay, I do love this guy, I'm going to marry him, I drew the box and I put a heart in it and told him that I loved him. Like, super sappy. But on our first wedding anniversary, we went and got that tattooed. And now our kids always want it drawn on their wrists. So it's kind of a fun family emblem.
That is cool. Yeah. Is it something that you have to put your wrists together in order for it to work? Or is it something that it just stands?
No, it's just standalone matching.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. So yeah, our stories are the same. It's funny, kind of connecting. We actually have 2 boys and 2 girls, not 3 boys and a girl.
Awesome.
But our oldest is going to be 12 in January, and then we have a 10-year-old, and then twins that are 8 years old.
That's right. So, that's right.
All right in the same deal there. Yeah. So we still love Colorado. We were just out there again this last August for my niece's wedding. My sister and her husband are camp directors at a camp near Woodland Park. up in the mountains. And so it's really nice every time I go back to visit now. We just get to go up to the mountains. And so beautiful. I love being in the mountains. We were teaching our kids actually, there's a mountain called Soldier Mountain that we can climb. And as we were coming down, I like to teach my kids that all the pine trees smell different. And so some pine trees smell like butterscotch. Some pine trees smell like vanilla. And so there's just different smells. And so I might have a picture of my two oldest kids standing by a tree just sniffing it. You know,
oh, that's so good.
Like you post it and people are like, why are you having your kids smell?
No, it's so true though. When I teach classes to kids out in the wilderness, that's one thing we'll have them do is the ponderosa pines smell. Some people say vanilla, some say cinnamon, but you get all these kids going up to trees and scratching them like a scratch and sniff sticker.
Yeah.
And you just see their faces like,
right.
Oh, I smell it.
Yeah, I love it. I think my oldest daughter tried to like pull off some bark and take it. But I'm fairly certain that the smell will go away, you know, and it'll just, you know, you don't have any pieces of furniture that smell like vanilla or butterscotch, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, so you, how did you come up with this idea? As far as, I love the whole concept of nurturing your family's faith through God's creation. I just think that's an incredible tool. I mean, it's something that obviously Scripture encourages us to do. Is this something that you've been doing for a while and then you thought, hey, this would be valuable for other people, I'm going to write it down? Maybe just walk me through that process for you a little bit.
So I have only been teaching theology through nature for the past probably 4 years. My first passion is theology. And I mentioned my husband and we met in Bible college, and I love speaking the truth, writing the truth, sharing the truth, rightly handling the truth, as we see in 2 Timothy. And after I wrote and published my first book, 936 Pennies, in 2018, I felt a little lost. I was kind of like, Lord, is this all you have for me? Like just one book and I'm done? I didn't know what to write next. And I spent a couple years just praying about it and starting books that I wasn't passionate about and didn't really go anywhere. And so I stepped away from it for a while. I was just feeling like I needed a break from trying to force a second book. And in the meantime, we were spending all this time out in the wilderness in Colorado. We were seeing our kids growing up and just having these incredible connections with the natural world. And I started to see that there is a real overlap between Scripture and nature. And I think God created it that way. So when my husband and I were in Bible school, they taught us that there are two main ways that God reveals himself to us. And the first is special revelation. That's his written, inspired, living and active word. That's his primary revelation to us that we actually get the gospel message from. But then there's a secondary revelation called natural revelation. And it is what we learn about God through what he has made. Just like when you stare at a painting long enough, you can learn about the artist. And that comes from Romans 1:20, that God's invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. And so as I'm watching my kids running through the forest and playing in the lake, and I'm reading God's word, and I'm realizing this is a powerful way to teach children. This is a powerful way for all of us to remember truth. And Jesus did it all the time in the Gospels. You see him teaching parables and using things like an olive branch and sand and flowers and sparrows. So I started to think, okay, if Jesus teaches that way, I think we can teach that way also. And so that's when I enrolled to train as a certified Master Naturalist. My mom had actually gone through the training a couple years prior. So I texted her one day and I was like, what is this? How do I do this? And so I went through that training as kind of a beginning, a launch pad, and then just kept taking more courses and just eating up everything I could, all this information about nature. And now whenever I read about nature, I see spiritual implications. And whenever I read the word, I'm getting these ideas for how to communicate it through things in nature. And that's where the whole concept of the book came from.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think it's fun. I mean, I know that you're specifically writing and over again, you say, hey, with your kids this or with your kids that. And I'm thinking, man, you shouldn't be limiting all of this to children. I mean, I don't think that you are, but I just think there's so much in here that is holds true and value for anyone in their walk of life. It's not just something that you're investing in your kids in, but just for us personally as adults, as we're in nature, as we're trying to disconnect from technology, as we're trying to do all of these different things. Like there's just such truth and value in what you're sharing. One thing that I don't remember where you went after this, but I don't even know. Can't even say the word right. Recency bias. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, recency bias.
Yeah, I love that concept, and how the whole idea is as you learn about something, all of a sudden you start to see it everywhere. The way that it's been most prominent actually in my life is when we start like looking for a new car. You find, I don't know, a Honda Pilot, and you're like, man, this is a great car. I want that. All of a sudden, everywhere you look, you see Honda Pilots, and you're like, I didn't realize there were so many Honda Pilots everywhere. So maybe talk me through a little bit. How does that pertain to this idea of finding God in creation?
I love that term as well, recency bias. I think it's just a fascinating topic. And I began seeing this as our kids and my husband and I became more and more familiar with the natural world. A big example in our life has been bird watching. So I know like a lot of times you think about bird watching as something you do in retirement, and all of a sudden you've never been interested in birds and now you're seeing them everywhere. Well, our son, when he was about 9, became very interested in birds. And my husband at the same time was also becoming interested in birds. And so together they just started going out and finding birds. And before I knew it, all of us were doing this, and we became avid bird watchers. Like we compete every year in bird watching, and it's this crazy thing that just kind of swallowed us up. But the thing is, as we spend more time learning about them and going outside, we learn their calls and their songs and their colors and their behaviors. And so now my kids can go outside and name specific species anywhere we go, at least in Colorado and around where we live. So now that they know their names, they see them more and more. And I think the same is true with when we learn about what God has created, we start seeing it all around us. It means more to us. So for one, we take care of it and we are good stewards of what he's created. But two, our kids are seeing the great variety of what God has made and the intricate designs that he has made in nature. Like Psalms tells us, "O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you made them all." And our kids are seeing that because they don't just look and see like, oh, it's a bird. Like they're like, oh, that's a white-crowned sparrow. They like to eat this and this. And when they are excited about those things, it kind of just takes on its own life because God created them to be filled with awe, to be filled with wonder, and to discover him through these things.
My wife took our kids on just a walk around our neighborhood, and they found a butterfly. And then this was actually before we read this book. But she just brought them back, and it's like the kids were naturally interested. They wanted to know more about this butterfly, and so they looked it up. They started researching. Where does it come from? What does it eat? What does it do? And they're learning and studying just because they went on a walk, and now all of a sudden they want to learn about it. And it's not like you're sitting in at home and you open up a book and say, hey, you need to learn about this thing. It's something that it just naturally progressed out of curiosity because they were actually outside doing something. And which is such a big deal, right? I mean, and you mentioned that was one of the things that I loved in your book is you have a chapter talking about, I think you called it like lost past times or something along those lines where we think about our childhoods, right? When I grew up, I would leave home and I'd go play with my neighborhood friends, and we would be outside even late into the night, or I'd be down at their house playing football in the backyard, or we played like games throughout the entire neighborhood. And so much of that is lost now because of different new dangers and things that have come into the world. And what I really appreciated the concept that you said is we still need to get outside. You just need to go with them, basically, right? Like it's still like it doesn't have to be a lost pastime. We don't have to rely on technology to entertain our children because we're afraid to send them outside. Send them outside. You just go with them now. And what a beautiful concept, and the reality of how good it is and how different our kids act when they're outside experiencing creation without even realizing it, as opposed to watch, even if it's good, wholesome television or whatever, like that screen time just really wreaks havoc on your brain and your psyche. So appreciate that and the reality behind that. One important thing for me when I think about what does this look like is, what does it look like for me? What does it look like for my family? And maybe you could give some own personal testimony to how are you utilizing creation, and what kind of things are you implementing in your family in order to walk your kids through this revelation?
Well, you mentioned technology, so let's pause there for a minute. I think that's a really big, hot topic because ours is really the first generation of parents forging through this highly technological world and trying to figure out, like, what in the world are we doing? And so in the book,
How old is he?
He is 12. Yeah. So we just entered into middle school. Yeah. So in the book, I talk about technology as an invasive pastime. And when you hear the word invasive, it means it's something that doesn't belong and can be threatening. So as a naturalist in nature, we have plants that belong where they are, and we have invasive plants. And I started thinking about technology in that way because there's a lot of similarities. And the first is that both are recent introductions. So the invasive plants that we have all around us here in Colorado, when you think about invasive plants, they were recently introduced in the last couple hundred of years to bring in exotic beauty to our gardens from distant lands. Likewise, technology is a recent introduction. And a second similarity is that they both came with good intentions. So like I said, the invasive plants were brought in because they give us this exotic beauty. And technology, likewise, had a lot of good implications and a lot of good intentions. And we use it for good, like producing this podcast right now. But the third similarity is that left unchecked and out of control, both are devastating. When you have invasive plants, they don't have any of their natural predators that they have in their homeland, so they quickly take over the landscape. Technology, if we don't have guards around that, it is going to take over the landscape of childhood. And so I think it is our job as parents to take that very seriously, but also to have a gentle approach that our children will be attracted to. And so instead of just saying like cold turkey, no technology, like that might not go over very well. It won't get them excited. And so we like to trade it with other activities that are attractive. Like, hey, if they are just in a season where they're watching a lot of screens, we might say, hey, we're not going to do that today. Instead, let's go down to the river and play with our friends. And friends are key because maybe a child doesn't want to go on a hike, but if their friends are coming, a lot of times that will win them over. And so another thing we like to do in our home is before they engage with technology, and they do not every day, but before they do, we like to have them play outside, clean something, read something, create something. So they are front loading their day with productive, creative, intentional things before they're going to a screen.
Yeah, that's good. We try to we use screen time as like a reward system. So at least, I mean, that's the goal, is that, hey, if you clean your room, you can get 20 minutes of screen time. If you clean the bathroom, if you do the dishes, if you take the dog out, as opposed to earning an allowance or earning money, they can earn screen time. And obviously that adds a limit. We also try to limit it. We're not great at this either. Definitely with video games, we limit that to the weekend. But sometimes coming home, we just flip it. It's so easy to turn the TV on and just sit down and become a couch potato. And especially after a long day, and you're like, let's all sit around and watch something. And so you spoke about being intentional, and that if you're not intentional with these things, that it progresses however it progresses, but we actually have to be intentional with how we approach technology. And you talked about intentionally just investing in your children's childhood, and making sure that you're making those changes needed in order to invest in the upbringing and the childhood experience that you're giving them. So maybe what else are you guys doing? How are you personally investing in your kids' childhood?
Mm-hmm. On the topic of intentionality, we have a visual in our home that reminds us of this. It's what my first book was based on. And it's a jar of 936 pennies. Yeah. So when our second son was being dedicated at church, he was 1.5 years old. And after our pastor prayed over us and we had dedicated him, our pastor turned to us and gave us this jar of 936 pennies. And he said, every penny in that jar represents 1 week that you have with your child between birth and 18. And he challenged us to remove a penny every week to remind us that that time is limited. And it's based off Psalm 90:12, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And of course, from that wisdom comes intentionality and action. And that was really hard at first to remove those pennies because our son was already 1.5 years old. I think we had to take out about 72 pennies to start. And so I had this idea to set up a second jar beside it where we put the pennies every week so that we are not overwhelmed as that first jar is going down, but rather we see the second jar building up and we realize we are making an investment in their childhood, in their future, in their eternity. And so we have sets of jars for each of our children. Right when you come in our house, you see them with their baby pictures and their current pictures. And it's this constant reminder to be checking in weekly, of course, more than that. But when we move the pennies, it's this reminder, what do I need to apologize to my child for this past week? What were some missed opportunities? What is something I can learn from this past week and go into the next week? And of course, it's not all of our self-effort. What that's doing is helping us to remember, I need Jesus desperately to do this crazy hard thing of parenting. And that's what it points us to, is that if we're going to make the most of that investment, the most of these weeks, and whether that's 936 or your child lives with you longer, whatever time you have with them under your roof, trusting that the Lord is going to make the most of that as we follow his lead.
Yeah, we have a good mentor of ours that all of their kids, I think they have 4 of their own, and then they adopted 2, and all 6 of them are now grown up, in ministry, love the Lord, love their family, have, healthy, marriages and things along those lines. And I remember asking him one day, what did you do? Why are your kids the way that they are, And his response was, he's like, I don't know what specifically we did. I just know that we love spending time with each other. And as our kids got older, they didn't have to go other places to find answers because they felt safe coming and talking to us about things. They didn't have to go other places to find people who would want to spend time with them because we were always spending time with them. Not that they didn't have friends, because, they did. But there's just something about that family unit and the strong family unit that stuck with them all the way through. So when I think about your pennies, and I think about being intentional, I think about this mentor of mine and how he invested in his family, and without knowing it, was intentional about their childhood, and now he's seeing the fruits of that. So love that. It's such a great analogy, and I don't see us able to do that because we would have to take half the pennies out right away. It'd be so depressing. We always remember the saying, though, that the days are long, but the years are short. It's kind of a popular cliche when it comes to parenting, but it's so true and so scary. And the idea that, in 4 years, Ezra will be able to drive a car just terrifies me. I don't know how you feel about your oldest being able to drive a car, but so there's other ways that we can invest in our childhood, or invest in our kids and in the childhood outside of technology. One that was really fun, an example that you said was giving them a board game, but taking the rules away and let them create rules. Is that something that you guys have done? How's that experience gone?
We've talked them through that analogy. I don't know that we've ever
actually done it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because sometimes when you write an idea in your mind, you've done that, but I'm like, now I'm questioning, because I know I've talked with them about it. But no, we had, what it was my actual real life example was, we were at this parking garage up in Estes Park, Colorado, and we were going to go for a walk along the lake, and my kids started making up a game. They were going to race up the stairs to the top of the parking garage and then race back down. And I heard my oldest son say right before they started, he goes, okay, the only rule is there are no rules. And I was like, okay, wait. So if your little brother wants to jump down 3 stories from the top of the parking garage, he can do that to win. And my son was like, no, okay, that's the only rule. You can't jump. And so I was like, okay, well, if he wants to like roll down the stairs, is that okay? And I could see my son getting kind of exasperated because I'm messing with his plan.
Yeah.
But he was getting it, that when you play, right, just let us have our fun. But when there are no rules, it doesn't work very well. And it might be fun, like with a board game, if you do that, if you take away all the rules and that everyone kind of play by their own way, it might be fun for a few minutes, but then there is this chaos and it's ultimately frustrating. So those examples I gave in a chapter about absolute truth, the absolute truth about nature, because I think that one thing nature shows us and our kids is that there is absolute truth. And I love this quote from George Orwell in his classic novel, 1984. Yes. He talks about, he talks about the solid world exists. Its laws do not change. Rocks are hard. Water is wet. And I think it's so simple, but it's so true that when we take our kids out into the wilderness, they don't get to decide the rules. We have to teach them about safety. Like we run into dangerous situations. Like it was so funny. I was thinking about this a few minutes ago when you talked about the dangers of letting kids outside these days. We live out in the county, and we don't really have so many dangers of the city life. But last week we had 2 mountain lions behind our back fence. And so we run into these other dangerous situations where we have to teach our kids, like, you don't get to project on that wild animal that it's going to be kind and treat you well. You have to operate within the laws of nature. And if there are laws in nature, there is a lawgiver, someone who wrote those laws. So they're learning through these experiences that there is absolute truth that they need to operate within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Operate it and respect it, you know? The analogy I always remember is if there's a man and he steps in front of a bus, it's either going to be the man or it's going to be the bus. It can't be both. Like, either the bus is going to stop and the man will be okay, or the bus is going to keep going and the man's not going to be okay, you know? And so same thing with gravity, right? I mean, all of these things, there's so many examples of, I don't even know why this is an argument that happens anymore. Is there absolute truth or not? I mean, except like, it's almost like that's Stone Age thinking, but because it's so clear that things are absolute. But I'm just kind of going through my list here, different things.
No, this is fun. Go for it.
So the next one was family hibernation. I thought that was an interesting concept. Can you just define what that is and what is family hibernation? What does that look like for you and your family?
I love this practice. We've been doing family hibernation for, I want to say this will be like our 10th year. And what it started as, no, not 10, because I think our oldest was a little older when we started, at least 8 years now.
How many times a year do you do family hibernation?
Just once. Our main family hibernation is once. And so it started as a reaction. We were off course. We just felt as a family that we weren't living according to our values. We were really busy. My husband and I are both business owners, and we were just drowning in that. And our kids were watching a lot of TV. And so we needed a reset. So it was actually my husband's idea. He said, why don't we hibernate, like the animals do, and just cozy up and take it easy. And so we set 2 weeks aside that winter, and we turned off the screens. And we homeschool. So we still did a little bit of school in the days. And my husband and I had to, of course, upkeep our businesses. But other than that, we canceled everything for 2 weeks. Unless it was like a fun family thing, like sledding or going on a walk together, but any activities, anything that felt heavy, we canceled. And then in the evenings, we would turn off all the lights. We would light candles, play music, board games, books, tasty snacks, and hot cocoa. So it's usually a winter thing for us. And that just carried on. And the thing is that those first few years, it was really that intentional 2 weeks. And then what we found is it started just seeping into the rest of our winter to where now it's really our entire winter where we just have these
what
cozy.
Rules in hibernation? What are the boundaries?
For us, it's going to look different depending on your home and your situation. But for us, it really is no screens outside of a little bit of work and maybe a family movie night, and no extracurricular activities, even like no volunteering for anything. That's my thing. Like, I'm quick to be like, yeah, I'll do that. And it's really meant to just encourage intentional family time. So anything that takes us apart, we're trying to get away from for those 2 weeks. So it's just been a really sweet thing in our home, and especially seeing how the Lord has developed it. We started, what came out of this, because I mentioned we just do it once a year, but what came out of it was the past 2 years, we have intentionally practiced Sabbath. So now we rest every week.
That was the comparison I had actually written down. It sounds a lot like a yearly Sabbath. That's, it is. It can be in conjunction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've been Sabbathing for 2 years. We Sabbath Friday evening to Saturday evening. For the most part, we don't drive anywhere. And that has just forced us to enjoy time together at our house, in our yard, around our neighborhood, with neighbors directly in our contact. It has been the sweetest gift and really imperfect.
What are your boundaries? Is that the same idea? Like
same
no
technology? Idea. Yep. No technology. I put my phone, I actually set an email responder Friday evening so that I don't feel like I need to even check email. It actually tells people, hey, my family's Sabbathing. I'll get back to you on Monday. And I've gotten really cool. What was that?
Can you do auto replies? You can probably put an auto reply on your phone too, couldn't you?
I haven't figured that out. If anyone knows that, let me know, because that's a struggle.
I think you can, at least with an Apple, you can put like the do not disturb.
Yeah.
I know when you're driving, it says, hey, I'm driving.
Yeah.
Gotta be.
There's
gotta be a way.
There has to be a way.
It has to be.
Because that's the one I struggle with is, like, if our kids if they walk over to the neighbor's house, I do check my phone because I want to make sure she's not texting, make sure the kids are good. And then like our family, like if my mom texts me, I want to make sure that I can get important text messages. You just have to walk
over there. That's the rule.
Yeah, right. But one thing I do is I'll remove social media apps from my phone over the weekend, because what do we do when we pick up our phone to check if there's a text? Well, then next thing we know, we're scrolling through social media. So I get rid of those visual cues to make it easier. So we do no technology. My phone is for the most part in a drawer, and we don't drive anywhere. We don't spend money. So it's actually been a really big help with our budgeting. So one day a week, we are not spending money, which is pretty great. So yeah, it's been sweet. We have a big brunch. Usually we sleep in and then have a big brunch together. We'll play board games. We read a ton of books. People ask me, how do you read so much? And I tell them Sabbath. On Saturdays, I read.
Yeah. That's good. I like all of that. Something that we're still trying to figure out a Sabbath that works for us. We've tried some different things that we found out things for our family that doesn't work. And so we're trying to figure out some things that will work. The other thing that I brought this concept up, and we haven't done a very good job of it at all, is having a bedtime for technology. So, hey, we're going to bed at we start getting ready for bed at like 8:30 at night. Well, what if we put our technology to bed at 7 or 6:30? And so phones go away, TV turns off, and then it's like consistent daily thing that we're doing where we're investing in family. And so we did it for like 3 days.
That's good. That's a start.
It fell apart, but it's one of those things that when we were in Colorado, we actually had a rule that we couldn't take our phones upstairs. And so we had spots for our phones downstairs that we would plug in, charge them at night and things like that. That way, at least upstairs, it was like a technology-free zone. But now we use them for our alarms and things along those lines, which is a terrible excuse. I mean, it's really easy just to go out and buy an alarm clock. But it's just one of those things that, again, it comes back to that intentionality, right? That if you're not being intentional about these things and being hard on those boundaries, it's so easy for that stuff to creep back in. And we know all of the stresses, if you're flipping through social media and you're learning about the Israeli-Palestine issues, or some political thing pops up, or you learn about local news of, a murder, whatever it is, where all of a sudden now you're having a hard time sleeping, you're having a hard time finding that rest, you're stressed out about stuff, whatever it might be. And it's like, you don't need that constant feed of information. And it's creating those boundaries and then adhering to those boundaries is just so good and so healthy for you as an individual, as well as a parent and just as a family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I encourage it. Anybody that is listening to this, figure out how can you, I love that idea of hibernation. It doesn't have to be 2 weeks. I think that, you do like a 3-day weekend hibernation. I don't know. I mean, not everybody can take an extra 2 weeks to do that. But there's, you fit it within your own. I like that. I appreciate that you said that in your book as well, that it's going to look different for every family, and it doesn't have to look the same, but you figure out what works for you. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I encourage people to be praying about it, right? That ask God, hey, what do you want us to do? That's something that we like to do with our kids a lot, is as we're trying to make these decisions, is not just, obviously there's some things that they can't participate in, but things that they can, we say, hey, would you join us in praying about this and seeing kind of how God speaks through them, and say, hey, we want to, as we make decisions, we want to ask God what's the right way to go, as opposed to just saying, this is the way I'm going to go, and then ask God to bless it. It's kind of taking that step back and saying, God, we want you to reveal the right way forward for us. So I love that. Find that hibernation, find that bedtime for your electronics, get out in nature, allow nature to teach both you and your family about who God is through that revelation. So again, I just want to encourage anybody, if you haven't heard of it, go and Rooted in Wonder. Is there anything, I know that you have the book, do you like people to go somewhere specific to buy that book?
No, anywhere. I just want people to get the book.
Anywhere.
It is available on audiobook now as well. I know, especially for parents, that's sometimes an easier way to listen. But in it, we end each chapter with a step outside section, and it's 2 parts. It's See God in Nature and See Nature in the Bible. So one is like a short devotional or Bible study that you can do with your child to help them see the nature narratives throughout Scripture and how God uses nature. And then the other is hands-on activities that you can use right away to get started. And then we also have a podcast for kids where we help families really grasp how nature and God go together. And that's Nat Theo, short for Natural Theology. And it's nature lessons rooted in the Bible. And it's for kids. It's super fun. We just geek out over nature and science and what we learn about God through them.
So what you're saying is you can have a hibernation or a Sabbath. Are you allowed to listen to the podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We do so many podcasts and audiobooks over, because it's whatever is filling you and teaching you and inspiring you. So I think that's totally okay.
Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, Eryn, for taking the time to come and share. Highly recommend the book. Please take into consideration all the things that we talked about today, and how can you implement these things in your own life in order to grow closer as a family, and in order to grow closer to your Creator, your God who cares about you and loves you. And so that's really what the big picture of all of this stuff is, right? Is we want to know God better. We want to follow Him with sincere hearts, and we want our kids and our families to do the same thing. So, Eryn, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for taking the time to be with me today, and for sharing your life and your wisdom with all of us, with our listeners. If you are still here, just want to encourage you and remind you that we do have a podcast that comes out every single Wednesday. Please make sure to check it out. We believe that you've been created strong by design, that God created you specifically to have a strong mind, body, and spirit. It is because sin entered the world that we get crippled in those areas in our lives. And so we want to help root ourselves back into the original design that we are created to be strong. And so check in with us every single week to see how you can implement those things in your life. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.